from a dark and starless sky.
Back to the middle. Well, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out to talk about the brand new album.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into Shadows and Silence. So I want to begin our journey, though, with living through the pandemic. 5 years ago, this pandemic was raging, so many unknowns, so many things were thrown at all of us, especially musicians. How did you get through that time period, and how has it either influenced this new album or what you do as a creative now?
Well, first of all, it put paid to a whole ton of gigs. I had a big tour in Russia that was probably, I don't know, 10 dates or something that got cancelled. So that was thing number one. My favorite gig probably in the world was a monthly I had for 17 years at the 55 bar in the Village.
Yeah.
And that was such an incredible gig because you could just turn up and, meet your guys there and no rehearsal, practice things, try them out, because the audience was like super jazz listeners. And so they loved that you were spontaneous or that you might try something new.
Yeah.
So, and having that every month was just an unbelievable blessing because it meant you got to work out things for albums. However, not this album, because I didn't really start working on this album properly until the pandemic was already, well underway. So instead of getting to visit my new material on my audience, my testers, I had to do everything myself. So that was one thing. But in another way, and it was a drag, of course it was a drag to lose those gigs and everything, but in another way it was very peaceful. And kind of being a musician, you're always so busy and running around and trying to fit this in and that in, and being able to just walk outside and see no traffic. I mean, I know a lot of people found that very stressful, but I found that very peaceful because I guess I spent some of my teens living in the countryside, and so it suddenly New York was turned into the quiet, peaceful countryside.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it was good things and bad things.
Yeah, I
So.
get it. I get it. So Shadows and Silence, talk to me a little bit about this project.
So about 20 years ago, believe it or not, I heard a very beautiful version of Nossien number one, which is probably his second most famous, I guess. One of his two most famous, the other one being Jim Nobody number one. And it was on an album called Piano Piano by a French singer called Anne Ducros, Ducros. And it was just her whole album was really standards and nothing crazy interesting happening. And then I think track number 6, I can't swear by it, but all of a sudden she did this arrangement, which was her arrangement of Nossien number one with no lyrics, just improv. And it was just, I had to listen to it over, when you get obsessive about things. I listened to that over and over and over again, pressing play again. And I had just come out of a bad relationship. And I somehow lyrics started to form from her version. I couldn't make them fit in the end. When I finally finished it, 20 years later, I finally finished that lyric. And when I finished it, it was because Luis, who's my pianist and amazing, well, I say my pianist on this project, and I've worked with him a lot of times live. He did the arrangement for this song, his incredible arrangement of it. But he said to me, don't try and fit it to that. Just make your lyric fit the actual song. And boom, out it came. That was definitely a good piece of advice. So that's the beginning, if you like. And then about 4 years ago, maybe nearly 5 years ago. No, because he was born in December. Yasushi, my bass player, Yasushi Nakamura, he and his wife had a baby on December the 16th, and during a snowstorm. And he was at the birth, of course, and I had actually witnessed the birth of my young eldest grandbaby. And so I knew what that feeling was like. I mean, when I was witnessing the birth, I was like, wow, I did that, because I was super young when I had a baby. So that's thing number one. But thing number two was I sort of understood the perspective of the person in my case, my son's perspective as the witness to this. And what an incredibly, it was a lot of stress just watching that happen, because you're a bit helpless. You can't really stop the pain and all that kind of business for the other person. So I thought about that whole experience and how it must have been for Yasushi, but also what a fabulous gift it is and what an incredible miracle it is to witness a birth and to actually be born. And so I wrote a lyric to Gymnopédie number 1 for him, imagining his playing with his son when he got older in the snow that was now falling, and it was softer than feathers, but it's where one day together we'll play. And so, and then I guess that was the second song. The first song I actually finished, and the second song on that album, and I thought maybe I could do a whole album of Satie, because it's not the whole, it's like 4 songs are not Satie, but they're inspired by him for me. But I think I felt like the more I listened to Satie, the more I heard his influence on people like Wayne Shorter, or, the jazz musicians who came afterwards, who'd make one little tweak in fact, I was talking to somebody last night, a harpist and singer in England called Tara Minton, and she was saying, oh yeah, when, Kind of Blue came out, I was like, this is just Satie. Yeah. So it's kind of, the more I got into it, the more I thought, this is, I can hear jazz in it. So it felt like it would work. So that's what I did.
What are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Well, the album, I know as a singer, I've had people come up to me afterwards, and like, I guess one time a man came up and I was singing a song about my interpretation of it. Nothing Will Be As It Was. It's the Milton Nascimento song, but in my interpretation, I think of it as being about the period of Reconstruction, when the slaves were all on the roads, and got my feet on the road just to see you and all that kind of. But oddly, at a concert which was to raise money to fund that album, man came up to me afterwards and said that it was the first time he'd cried since his son had died. And I realized that you do what you do what you feel, but how someone else is going to interpret it is, I like that my lyrics, when I write a lyric, I like the idea, not that I wrote Nothing Will Be As It Was, but I like the idea that somebody who's listening will be able to put their own, they'll hear my feeling, but they can put their own interpretation on it, and it will mean something to them, because that's how it is for me as a listener. So as a singer, it's great. Somebody will come up to you and say how it affected them. And as a listener, I mean, the Andrew Cross is a perfect example. Her wordless version of Nocien number 1 brought up all these different feelings for me. So also this album is very, a few people died. My mom died. One of my dearest friends here in New York died, and I was there with him for his last few days on earth, like spoon feeding him in the hospital and stuff, and because it was very sudden. And another friend of mine died, and then Yusushi's baby was born, and so all these different things, life events, if you like, happened, and they're all in these songs, even the songs that I'm reinterpreting that were written by other people. So like Léo Ferré avec le temps, or I can't even remember, or ESP. ESP, that's a lyric by Cassandra Wilson, and it's called Never Broken, but it really fitted with the kind of spiritual, if you like, aspect of this album. It's like people die, but are they still here? You know, is there such a thing as a ghost? Do we go to heaven? Where did we come from when we were born? Because one of the songs I wrote, I said to Yasushi, oh, he had another baby. And I said, oh, I should write one for the new baby. And he said, yeah, you know, why not, whatever. And I started writing the song for this new baby, but it ended up being a song about my Uncle Ken, who died, and a reincarnation. So you never even know where your songs are even going to take you. But so I hope that people get from it. I hope people like the music, and I mean, and I love Yasushi's arrangements. He did a bunch of arrangements on, not Yasushi, sorry, Luis Perdomo's arrangements are so imaginative and very much reflecting the sentiment of each song. That really surprised me, how lyrically appropriate his arrangements are. So that's what I hope people get, that they can experience lots of different emotions.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginnings. Take me back to where you were born and raised. How did singing, how did jazz, how did all of this become your destiny?
When I was a child, one of my very earliest memories is singing. My mom, I was just thinking about her. She was so talented at so many things. She could sing, she could write, she could draw. And one of the things she did a lot was sing. And she taught me adult songs. You know, I was singing Jim Reeves songs when I was 3 and 4 and stuff, because she got a kick out of that. And then I also had a very kind of disjointed childhood, moved every year. I went to 16 schools between the age of 4 and 15. And you can't see it now, but I had here in America, everyone just thinks I'm English. But in England, everyone's like, where are you from? Going like that, you know, because I have a tan. And at that time, I didn't know. So I found out much later and made an album about finding out that my dad was black, my birth father. So I'd had all these things, and there's something about music, singing, or if you were good at an instrument, I'm sure it must be the same, where you get to express wordless feelings that you don't even have words for, even though you may be, in the case of a singer, using words. So I kind of clung on to music in a way. It was a constant. And then my mum is one of those people who like picks things up and drops them and thinks, oh, I'm not interested anymore. She had a guitar in the house. And so I picked it up because it was there when I was 12, and I taught myself to play the guitar. A friend of mine showed me a couple of chords, and I taught myself to play the guitar, and I sang a lot of folk music. I loved Sandy Denny and Fairport Convention and Jackie McPhee and Pentangle, and just, I guess, folk. And which I now listen to and think, wow, that actually is very jazzy. You know, they got a stand-up bass and all that. But at the time, I didn't know what jazz was. And I guess that's how, you know, music was a thing that I always did. And then jazz came much later, and my interest in jazz I mean, I guess I heard Native Dancer by Wayne Shorter. That introduced me to Milton Nascimento, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Wow. That's another one I obsessively couldn't stop listening to. And I actually listened to it every day for 15 years. And then, but at the beginning, I came across an album Milton had done with Sarah Vaughan, and I was like, wow, this Sarah Vaughan sounds pretty good. And so then from Sarah Vaughan, I got into Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, I'd heard the names, but I hadn't really listened. So my doorway into jazz was definitely Native Dancer. But and actually I wrote a lyric to Anna Maria, which Wayne Shorter gave me shared writing on without me even asking for shared writing. I had just asked for permission. Um, so that was just like an amazing kind of end of that thing for me to have my introduction to jazz, then have him say, yes, you can have shared writing on that lyric. So so yeah, I guess that's how, but I yeah, the more, and then I was in a relationship. By the way, I'm very happily married. I've been very happily married now for about 18 years. Well, with my husband for 18 years.
Yeah.
But I've had some trial relationships, and in one of them, I was with somebody who actually is a friend, but who really believed in my singing. And I kind of got into actually becoming a singer because I was a journalist for a long time, features journalist, not about music. Um, because I wanted to please him, and he was, he fell out of love, I guess, or whatever. And I thought if I sing, maybe that will make him, I definitely got his attention when I
Yeah.
was singing. He even though, and it really meant a lot that he wasn't biased, because he would have been so embarrassed if I'd been terrible, because
Yeah.
he's a musicologist. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I'm not so bad. I mean, before that, I just sang just for fun, just for me, just for the expression. But so that was a kind of an experience of having singing from the outside in, if you like, for that purpose.
So what was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away?
Oh man, that blew me away. Wow. Um, that's like asking what was my last movie I saw. I don't even know. Uh, oh my goodness. Well, two actually. One, and I saw this first, was Sarah Vaughan at Queen Elizabeth Hall. And she was, I mean, she was insane. I mean, of course, it's a huge hall. It's as big as Carnegie Hall. And she made it seem very intimate. And then there were so many people, I guess. Maybe, I don't know if they were part of the crew or whoever, but there were people on the stage behind her as well, because it was so sold out. And at one point, she said to us, I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to turn my back on you because, these people have come to hear me as well. And I think it's only fair that I sing a couple of songs for them. And I actually copied that at Philharmonic Hall in Omsk in Russia, because we had people behind us as well. And it was, you really felt like you knew her. It felt like it was such an intimate and amazing concert. And then I think I cried. I'm sure I did. And then the other one was, I think also at Queen Elizabeth Hall, was Milton Nascimento.
Wow.
And that was the first time I had seen him, and the first time I'd seen a Brazilian. And the Brazilians come out for the stars. And at the end of the concert, people were standing on the chairs. They couldn't even stay seated. They couldn't even sit in the art. They had to get on the chair, which was awkward because it was one of those flip down cinema type seats where you had, I think, where you had to, where it was felt a bit unstable, but people were doing it and singing along and clapping and cheering. So both those concerts were absolute stunners. I'm so glad I was alive to see them.
Yeah. So after all of these years, what do you like the best about being a professional musician? What gets you up every day?
Learning.
Yeah.
And that, as probably as any kind of musician, certainly as a classical musician, I'm sure, and definitely as a jazz musician, which is all I can really speak about, you know that you are never ever going to get to the end of it. I might be singing when I'm 100, and I'll still, if I could live to 101 day, there'd still be some new stuff that I could learn on that extra day that I had. It's perfect for people who get bored easily, because there's no way you could get bored.
Yeah.
So it's such a growth thing, and it's also changing a lot. You hear there's so many different aspects and so many different kinds of jazz, like avant-garde jazz or straight up jazz, and they all have their beauty. I don't do avant-garde. I don't particularly do straight up, but I still lean towards that native dancer type music, I think.
So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one show with your own eyes, where would you go?
I would go to Cafe Society, and I would see Billie Holiday singing Strange Fruit.
Yeah.
Because the idea of, first of all, seeing her and her all dressed up, with a gardenia and everything, and then singing such a political song. It's really like the point of jazz in a way.
Yeah.
And I met somebody who used to come to all my gigs. I think he's died now because he was pretty old back then. And he had seen her live, and he said that on her way to the stage, she brushed past him and touched his arm. He felt her touch his arm, not with her hand, just with her body.
Yeah.
And he said it just sent just like shivers through his whole body.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Lucky
wild.
thing. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, everyone you work with, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh my God. You mean as just as a person?
Yeah, just in general, like your perception of you.
I think of myself as this probably sound crazy, but as first and foremost, I think of myself as a mother. I've been a mother since I was just 16, and it's such a big part of my identity. I can't actually remember when I wasn't one. I mean, I can, but hardly at all. My life pre having my son was really childhood. So, and that's how I am. Like when I first met my husband, he was always having to say to me, "Listen, you're not my mother," because that's kind of what I do. So I think of myself as that, I guess, and I guess as a musician, as a friend, that's a very hard question.
No,
Good
you did
question,
great.
hard question.
Yeah, no, you did great. That was a wonderful answer. So let me ask you this. If anybody wants to pick up the latest album, catch you live, any of your previous work, any of the good business, where do they go?
Well, right now I don't know how to do pre-save, so I'm trying to work that out. But you can pre-order it on Bandcamp, which is I think tessasouter.bandcamp.com. My website, of course, will have everything when I finally work out how to do it. That's Tessa Souter, TESSASOUTER.com. And the album comes out actually on June 27. And I have a gig actually on the day that Erik Satie died, exactly 100 years ago, on July the 1st, at Joe's Pub in New York. So I'm excited, very excited to be back.
That's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, Tessa, this has been great. Thank you so much for opening up about your music, about your life in music. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, you bet. Jazz fans, Joe Domino here, the host of the weekly Neon Jazz radio show and regular interview series being produced and distributed from Lee Summit, Missouri. We are very excited to let you know about the second annual Lee Summit Jazz Festival taking place again this summer on June 28th at the Bridge Space, located at 210 Southwest Market Street in downtown Lee Summit. Following the success of the 2024 festival, the lineup will include Lee Summit students, Casey Area Youth Jazz, Paganova with Michael Pagan, Horoscope with Stan Kessler, Brad Gregory, Adam Larson, and the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. There will also be food trucks and vendors to round out a day of celebration. Early bird tickets are 2 for $30, and all details can be found at lsjazzfest.com. We can't wait to see you there.